Boeing's reputation as an industry leader in aircraft manufacturing has been built over decades of engineering excellence. However, in 2024, a series of alarming incidents began to unravel that hard-earned trust. What started as isolated reports of minor malfunctions quickly escalated into widespread concern as multiple aircraft suffered serious structural failures mid-flight, forcing emergency landings and creating panic among passengers and airline operators alike. One of the most unsettling cases involved a Boeing aircraft that experienced a sudden decompression due to a fuselage panel detachment. Passengers recalled a terrifying moment when a section of the cabin wall gave way, exposing them to the deafening roar of wind at 35,000 feet. Oxygen masks dropped as alarms blared, and flight attendants rushed to reassure those on board. Pilots, trained for such emergencies, immediately began an emergency descent to stabilize cabin pressure and prevent a more catastrophic outcome. The aircraft ultimately landed safely, but the incident left the aviation world in shock. How could such a critical failure occur on a modern airliner? Investigations quickly followed, and what they revealed was troubling. Preliminary reports suggested that manufacturing defects, combined with possible lapses in quality control, contributed to the failure. Engineers found inconsistencies in the aircraft's assembly process, with certain fasteners and structural reinforcements not meeting required specifications. Experts pointed out that such oversights, if widespread, could pose serious risks to passenger safety across Boeing's fleet. In another incident, pilots of a different Boeing model struggled to control their aircraft after a sudden and unexplained loss of hydraulic pressure. Key flight control surfaces became difficult to manage, forcing the crew to declare an emergency. Passengers described the experience as harrowing, with the aircraft veering sharply before stabilizing just in time for an emergency landing. Once again, an investigation uncovered troubling signs: hydraulic components that appeared to have worn out prematurely, suggesting flaws in either the design or maintenance recommendations issued by Boeing. These events were not isolated. Across different airlines and aircraft models, reports of structural weaknesses, pressurization failures, and unexpected mechanical malfunctions began to emerge. While commercial aviation remains one of the safest forms of transportation, the frequency of these Boeing-related emergencies was unsettling. Airline operators, already facing intense pressure to maintain schedules and ensure passenger confidence, found themselves caught in a difficult situation. Some grounded their Boeing fleets temporarily for additional inspections, while others demanded urgent safety reassurances from the manufacturer. The financial implications were significant: delayed flights, canceled routes, and the logistical nightmare of repositioning aircraft all added to the mounting crisis. For Boeing, the backlash was immediate. Aviation authorities, already wary due to past controversies, accelerated their scrutiny of the company's quality control measures. Experts within the industry questioned whether production had been rushed, potentially prioritizing speed and cost efficiency over safety and long-term reliability. As public concern grew, passengers began expressing hesitation about flying on Boeing aircraft. Social media became flooded with discussions, and travel forums saw a rise in questions about whether certain models were safe to fly. News outlets covered each new incident with urgency, further fueling doubts about the manufacturer's reliability. Despite Boeing's assurances that each aircraft undergoes rigorous testing before delivery, confidence was eroding fast. The idea that structural components could fail mid-flight was not just a theoretical risk. It was happening, and in some cases, with terrifying consequences. The deeper investigators looked, the more concerning the findings became. Inspections across multiple aircraft revealed minor structural weaknesses that, if left unchecked, could lead to significant failures over time. While Boeing maintained that these issues could be addressed through enhanced maintenance protocols, industry professionals were unconvinced. They questioned whether these vulnerabilities should have been caught long before the planes ever left the factory. Regulators responded by expanding their investigations, demanding increased transparency from Boeing regarding its manufacturing and inspection processes. Airlines began considering alternative aircraft providers, shifting orders to Boeing's main competitor, Airbus, which capitalized on the uncertainty surrounding its rival. For pilots and crew members, The crisis created new challenges. While highly trained to handle emergencies, they were now facing situations they shouldn't have encountered in the first place. Some spoke anonymously about concerns that certain aircraft were being delivered with known issues that had not been properly addressed before entering service. As more details emerged, the larger picture became clear. This was not just a case of one or two aircraft experiencing isolated problems. It was a systemic issue that called into question the integrity of Boeing's manufacturing and oversight processes. Boeing, once seen as the gold standard in commercial aviation, was now at a crossroads. The structural failures that had shaken the industry in 2024 were more than just unfortunate incidents. They were a wake-up call. If the company didn't take immediate and drastic action, the damage to its reputation could be irreversible. The public was watching, airlines were making tough decisions, and regulators were preparing to impose stricter measures. The question was no longer whether Boeing had a problem, it was whether they could fix it before another disaster occurred. As concerns over Boeing's structural failures intensified, regulatory agencies worldwide took decisive action. Aviation authorities in multiple countries ordered emergency inspections on specific aircraft models, demanding immediate evaluations of potential weaknesses. Airlines, already struggling with operational disruptions, were now facing an even greater challenge: how to keep their fleets running while ensuring passenger safety. One of the first major regulatory responses came from the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, which issued an urgent directive requiring thorough checks on Boeing aircraft that had shown signs of manufacturing inconsistencies. Airlines had no choice but to comply, grounding dozens of planes to carry out detailed assessments. The ripple effect was immediate. Hundreds of flights were canceled, and thousands of passengers faced delays as airlines scrambled to adjust their schedules. International regulators followed suit. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, ESA, implemented similar measures, tightening oversight on Boeing's aircraft used within European airspace. Asia-Pacific carriers, some of Boeing's biggest customers, also launched their own safety reviews. The global aviation network was now deeply entangled in Boeing's growing crisis, with airlines struggling to maintain reliability as more planes were pulled from service. For passengers, trust in Boeing aircraft had already been shaken, and now, with news of groundings spreading rapidly, confidence in the manufacturer hit a new low. Flight bookings on certain aircraft models declined, and social media was flooded with discussions about safety concerns. Some travelers began actively avoiding flights operated by Boeing jets, choosing alternatives whenever possible. Airline executives were caught in the middle of a mounting problem. While they relied on Boeing aircraft for daily operations, they could not ignore the safety implications of continued failures. Some airlines issued statements reassuring customers that inspections were being conducted, but internally, many were reevaluating their long-term commitments to Boeing. Competitor Airbus, which had long been Boeing's rival in commercial aviation, saw an uptick in interest from airlines reconsidering their future fleet acquisitions. The financial impact on Boeing was staggering. As confidence eroded, stock values plummeted, and shareholders grew increasingly uneasy about the company's future. Airlines considering new aircraft purchases hesitated to finalize orders, and some even explored canceling or deferring existing commitments. The potential loss of billions in revenue loomed over Boeing, threatening to reshape its dominance in the aviation industry. Amidst the crisis, Boeing executives attempted to regain control of the situation. Press conferences were held, where company representatives insisted that safety remained their top priority. They acknowledged the concerns raised by regulators and airlines and pledged to work closely with authorities to address every identified issue. However, these assurances did little to calm an already skeptical public. Boeing's engineering teams worked around the clock to identify and rectify the root causes of the structural failures. Inspections were expanded, and production facilities underwent increased scrutiny. The company made efforts to enhance quality control, but with multiple investigations underway, it became evident that the problems were deeper than initially thought. As investigations progressed, alarming details surfaced. Some reports suggested that cost-cutting measures implemented over the years had led to compromises in manufacturing standards. Employees from within Boeing, some speaking anonymously, revealed concerns about pressures to meet production deadlines, sometimes at the expense of meticulous inspections. Former engineers and aviation experts began weighing in on the crisis, pointing to a pattern of recurring issues that had emerged in previous years. They highlighted past incidents where safety concerns had been downplayed or overlooked in favor of maintaining delivery schedules. These revelations added to the growing public distrust in the company, making it clear that Boeing's problems extended beyond a few isolated manufacturing defects. The crisis deepened as airlines faced logistical nightmares trying to replace grounded aircraft. Some carriers resorted to leasing older planes to fill gaps in their fleets, while others had to scale back flight operations temporarily. Passengers bore the brunt of these disruptions, with frequent cancellations and extended delays affecting their travel plans. Pilots, flight attendants, and airline staff found themselves answering more questions from concerned travelers. Crews assigned to Boeing aircraft were met with unease from passengers who had seen the headlines and feared another failure could occur mid-flight. Despite repeated assurances that safety procedures were in place, the lingering doubts remained. The strain on the aviation industry was undeniable. With a growing number of airlines considering a shift in fleet strategy, Boeing's dominance was now under real threat. Airbus capitalized on the opportunity, positioning itself as the more reliable alternative, and negotiations for aircraft orders quietly shifted in its favor. Boeing now faced its most difficult challenge in years, repairing its reputation while addressing widespread safety concerns. It was no longer just about fixing a technical issue. It was about restoring confidence in an industry where trust is everything. Regulators continued to impose strict oversight, ensuring that no aircraft re-entered service without passing rigorous inspections. While some planes were cleared for flight, the damage to Boeing's credibility had already been done. The question that remained was whether the company could recover from this crisis, or if the consequences would permanently alter its standing in global aviation. The pressure to act was immense, and the entire world was watching to see if Boeing could turn things around before it was too late. The growing list of mechanical failures and mid-flight emergencies made it clear that Boeing was facing more than just isolated incidents. When reports of near-fatal accidents surfaced, the crisis escalated beyond airline disruptions and financial losses. It became a matter of life and death. Aviation safety authorities intensified their scrutiny, determined to prevent a catastrophe before it was too late. One of the most alarming cases involved a Boeing aircraft that experienced sudden control malfunctions during descent. The pilots, while trained in handling emergencies, found themselves struggling to stabilize the aircraft as it veered unpredictably. Flight data later revealed that a key sensor had failed, sending incorrect signals to the aircraft's control system. While the crew managed to regain control and land safely, the event exposed yet another flaw that raised serious concerns about design reliability. In another incident, passengers on board a Boeing-operated flight endured a terrifying ordeal when the aircraft's landing gear failed to deploy properly. The pilots circled the airport for over an hour, attempting multiple emergency procedures to force the gear into position. As fire trucks and emergency crews lined a runway, the flight crew executed a high-risk landing that sent sparks flying as the plane skidded along the tarmac. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but the terrifying scene played out on live news broadcasts, adding to the public's growing fears about Boeing aircraft safety. As these events unfolded, families of past victims from previous Boeing-related accidents spoke out, demanding accountability. Legal teams representing affected passengers filed lawsuits against the company, arguing that known defects had been ignored for too long. The legal battles added another layer of pressure to Boeing, already struggling to contain the damage. Government officials, seeing the increasing risk, called for emergency summits to discuss whether certain aircraft models should be permanently removed from service. Some countries took independent action, banning specific Boeing aircraft from their airspace until investigations were complete. The message was clear. Trust in the manufacturer had eroded to a critical point, and without immediate corrective action, the consequences could be devastating. Behind closed doors, Boeing executives faced difficult conversations with airline CEOs. Carriers that had long been loyal to the manufacturer were now openly questioning their partnerships. Orders for new aircraft were put on hold, with some airlines exploring alternatives. The damage to Boeing's reputation was spreading far beyond passenger travel. Cargo operators, military contracts, and private aviation companies were all reconsidering their reliance on the company's aircraft. Inside Boeing's production facilities, the pressure mounted. Engineers and assembly workers were instructed to conduct deeper quality assessments on aircraft in development, but reports surfaced that these checks were being rushed to avoid further delivery delays. The balance between safety and corporate interests had reached a breaking point. The aviation community, consisting of pilots, mechanics, and industry professionals, began to voice concerns more openly. Aviation forums and internal whistleblower reports painted a troubling picture. Some employees had raised red flags about potential risks long before the crisis became public. Others admitted that corners had been cut to meet production deadlines, a claim that Boeing leadership denied, but one that regulators were determined to investigate. Passenger confidence continued to decline as more people actively avoided flights operated by Boeing aircraft. Some travel agencies even noted a shift in booking preferences, with customers specifically requesting alternatives. Airlines, sensing the trend, discreetly adjusted flight assignments, opting to use non-Boeing aircraft on high-profile routes whenever possible. Airbus, Boeing's largest competitor, saw a surge in interest. Airlines previously committed to Boeing began discussions about switching future purchases to Airbus, citing safety concerns and reliability issues. The shift wasn't immediate. Fleet transitions take time, but the long-term implications were clear. If Boeing didn't resolve its crisis quickly, it risked losing its market dominance. With the aviation industry watching closely, Boeing made public commitments to improving safety. New inspection protocols were announced, along with promises of increased transparency in manufacturing. But these assurances did little to change the reality. Trust takes years to build, and only moments to lose. The global impact of Boeing's crisis reached beyond commercial airlines. Financial markets reacted with volatility, with investors wary of further losses. Government contracts involving Boeing defense projects came under review as officials questioned whether safety concerns in the commercial sector extended to military aircraft as well. Despite Boeing's efforts to contain the fallout, the reality was undeniable. The crisis had revealed deep flaws not only in individual aircraft, but in the corporate culture that had allowed safety to become secondary to deadlines and profit margins. Airline executives, regulators, and aviation professionals knew that Boeing's future depended on more than just temporary fixes. The company needed to prove, through action rather than words, that it was committed to the highest standards of safety and engineering. With public trust at an all-time low, the question now was whether Boeing could repair its reputation before another disaster forced the industry to reconsider its place in global aviation entirely. As Boeing faced one of the most challenging moments in its history, the company was forced to acknowledge the depth of the crisis. The accumulation of mechanical failures, regulatory interventions, and mounting public distrust had reached a point where quick fixes were no longer an option. The world was watching, waiting to see whether the aviation giant could recover or if this would mark the beginning of an irreversible decline. Inside the company, leadership scrambled to formulate a response that would reassure passengers, airlines, and regulators alike. Sweeping internal reviews were launched, focusing on everything from engineering protocols to supplier quality control. Production lines were temporarily slowed, allowing for thorough inspections on aircraft still in development. These efforts were intended to demonstrate accountability, but skepticism remained. Regulators continued their rigorous oversight, ensuring that no aircraft returned to service without passing the most stringent safety evaluations. Independent audits revealed areas where manufacturing shortcuts had led to the failures, pushing Boeing to overhaul its approach to quality assurance. The industry could no longer afford compromises, and the message from authorities was clear. Either Boeing addressed the systemic issues or risked losing its standing as a global leader in aviation. As investigations progressed, airlines made difficult decisions about their future with Boeing. Some reduced their reliance on the manufacturer, shifting orders toward competitors who had maintained a stronger safety record. Others chose to renegotiate contracts, demanding stricter guarantees and financial protections in case further issues arose. The damage was already done, and while Boeing worked to repair relationships, Airlines had to prioritize their own reputations and passenger confidence. Passengers remained wary, with many continuing to question the safety of Boeing aircraft. Online discussions reflected the deep concern that had settled among travelers, with some going as far as changing flight plans to avoid specific models. Travel agencies reported a noticeable trend in customer preferences as people became more aware of the aircraft they were booking. Trust, once lost, was proving difficult to regain. Boeing executives held press conferences, emphasizing their commitment to safety and transparency. They spoke of reforms, stronger oversight, and their determination to prevent future failures. While these statements were necessary for damage control, they were not enough to erase the reality of what had already occurred. Actions would have to speak louder than words, and only time would determine if the changes being implemented were truly effective. Within the aviation community, discussions grew about the broader implications of Boeing's crisis. Pilots, engineers, and industry veterans debated whether the failures were a result of prioritizing profits over safety, or if they reflected deeper issues within modern aircraft manufacturing. Some believe the problem stemmed from the company's long-standing need to compete aggressively with Airbus, leading to rushed production cycles and overlooked details. Others pointed to past decisions that had shifted priorities away from the careful craftsmanship that once defined the company's legacy. For Boeing, recovering from the crisis meant more than just correcting technical issues. It required rebuilding credibility, not only with airlines and regulators, but with the public that had once trusted its name without question. The road ahead was uncertain, and every move the company made would be scrutinized. Lawsuits from affected passengers and airline stakeholders added another layer of difficulty. Legal teams pushed for accountability, seeking compensation for damages caused by safety failures. Settlements were negotiated, but no amount of money could undo the fear and uncertainty that had gripped those who had experienced the terrifying incidents firsthand. As months passed, the aviation industry adjusted to the new reality. Airlines made careful decisions about which aircraft to prioritize, balancing operational needs with passenger preferences. New safety standards were implemented, not just for Boeing but across the industry, as regulators sought to prevent a repeat of the crisis. For Boeing's engineers and designers, the situation was deeply personal. Many had dedicated their lives to building safe, reliable aircraft, and the recent failures weighed heavily on them. Determined to restore the company's reputation, teams worked tirelessly to refine manufacturing processes, strengthen quality control, and ensure that every aircraft met the highest safety standards before leaving the factory. Despite the turmoil, there were signs of gradual recovery. As new aircraft underwent enhanced testing and inspections, reports of mechanical failures decreased. Airlines that had paused Boeing orders began considering future investments once again, cautiously optimistic that the company was making the necessary changes. For passengers, the process of regaining confidence was slower. Some remained hesitant, choosing alternative aircraft when possible, while others trusted that the regulatory measures had made flying safer than before. Over time, discussions about Boeing's crisis faded from the headlines, replaced by new developments in aviation technology and airline operations. The crisis of 2024 would not be forgotten. It would serve as a lasting reminder of what happens when safety standards are compromised and when corporate decisions prioritize efficiency over reliability. Boeing had been given a second chance, but the lessons learned came at a significant cost. In the end, the company's future depended not on promises, but on results. Every aircraft that took off had to be a testament to the commitment Boeing had made to restoring faith in its name. The industry, the airlines, and the passengers who boarded those planes would decide if the company had truly redeemed itself. As the world moved forward, one truth remained: aviation could not afford another failure of this scale. Safety had to come before profit, precision before speed, and integrity before competition. Boeing had been given the opportunity to correct its course, but whether it had truly learned from the crisis would be revealed in the skies above, where trust in flight could never be taken for granted again.